I am convinced that nobody knows, even on the crypto side or on the traditional side, the actual volume of money that is laundered globally every year. I think that regardless of that, the ratio or the percentage in sort of absolute terms, there can't be any comparison between the volume laundered to crypto and the volume laundered to traditional.
We're talking probably trillions in the normal money movement, and maybe billions in the crypto movement.
We used to, this is very, very early days Sayari stuff, but when we were pitching in our early some of our early pitch materials, we had because we would get this question all the time. It was like 2015, as everybody was really, getting really excited about crypto and thinking about, like what could happen with money laundering or whatever. And so we would get this question from investors all the time. And we had this graphic of the estimated amount of money that was laundered through crypto. Kind of it was a bar graph, and on one side it was crypto, and it was like hundreds of millions of dollars, something like that. And then, going like the other side all the way up, and then onto the next slide, a bar, and then onto the next slide, the next bar, onto the next slide. And then the top of the bar, like 6 slides later, is the volume of money laundered through the traditional financial system.
Totally. So the crypto is not even 1 day probably worth of the laundering for crypto for a year. It's not even 1 day yet for all the others laundering.
Now, I will say though, so first, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't tackle both, right? Both are important. I just think we, still have a ton of work to do in our kind of ability to stop dirty money through more traditional channels. But, for me, crypto never struck me as a super logical or efficient way to move.
Right. There's a record. There's like
tons of money.
Yeah.
If you kind of put yourself in the shoes of like a professional cartel launderer, I would have to imagine that just thinking about shipping, containers of bulk recycled cell phones or something like that has no market value, kind of make up whatever value you want and ship that, and somebody can buy it for something else, some other amount of money, and the difference can kind of be the transfer of value. Like that is, to me, one of the only reliable ways of actually moving, transferring that much value. I think for crypto, there's probably use cases of sort of small volume, high value. Fentanyl precursors kind of comes to mind, right? Like something that you don't need. It's not talking, billions and billions and billions of dollars at a time, or millions, tens of millions at a time. So I think that is, I think there are definitely, I would hesitate to even call them edge cases, because they're well-defined use cases that we have to worry about. But I do think even in, as I said a second ago, even in situations like that, you look deep enough, you'll probably still find some reliance on the traditional financial system.
One of the problems is for many jurisdictions around the world, if you just think of kind of like emerging markets world, like almost 100% of companies are doing some sort of money laundering because they have to from their own government. They often have 2 sets of books. My guess is like every company in Russia has always had 2 sets of books, but that's probably true of like many, many, many countries that are out there, because they're trying to avoid their own government. Their own government may have like certain onerous things, or that maybe that's more of an accepted practice there. And so like, money laundering becomes like the norm for many, many, many companies. And maybe even the majority of companies around the world have to engage in it. And so then it's like, okay, well, what level of money laundering are we willing to accept to go through, right?
Yeah. Kind of back to the offshoring problem that we just discussed in the context of China. Yeah, I don't know. For that reason and other reasons, it can be very difficult to collect data and get transparency in places like that, that we're talking about, Russia, China, et cetera. I will say also, though, that one of the ways I often describe what we do is sort of arbitraging what people think is available publicly versus what is actually available publicly.
Yep.
And that's true of many things, but in many of these environments, there is just far more information available publicly if you know where to look, and whether that's the legacy of communism, a very highly bureaucratic record keeping culture, whatever it is. There is just a lot of data. It's not necessarily easy to find. You have to be prepared for, foreign language, non-machine readable, semi-structured, unstructured data. But it does typically exist more so than people think, both in terms of the, uh, regulators sort of, needing help and sort of where to look, but also, or compliance teams, and us helping them kind of open up that data so they can look at it. But then also the people who are actually creating these shell companies or whatever in the first place. Like, I don't know that they fully realize that, that record of that, with that receipt sort of scanned and attached to the back of it that says, I'm Chapo's kid and I created this company, and here's the receipt for where, the money was, which bank the money was paid out of, scanned right onto the document. That stuff does exist, and it does exist at scale.